Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Konoha Hiden, The Perfect Day for a Wedding. Chapter 6. The Legendary Teacher. I'm glad I chose this job. Until you were able to have that thought with pride surging through your chest, then your life wasn't truly a happy one. This was because a job was something you chose to live through for your own sake, as well as the sake of others. Or at least, that was the way that Yumino Iruka thought. And, right now, Iruka was extremely happy. His chest was bursting with pride when he thought about it. The trigger for this sudden burst of joy was simply this. He glanced at 3 syllables on top of Ikazoku Ramen's most popular toppings list, Naruto. Just glancing at it made Iruka immediately think of Naruto and Hinata's upcoming wedding, and before he knew it, he was overwhelmed with emotion. It wasn't because he was easily moved to tears with his old age. It was because the emotion overwhelming Iruka was likely something very close to parental love and affection. And a certain something had happened to make him even more overwhelmed. The other day, Iruka had been in the academy's staff room as usual, working through some documents. Naruto had come to see him with an incredibly deferential look on his face. He said he had something to ask Iruka, something about the wedding. Iruka had already let Naruto know he was definitely going to come to the wedding, so he didn't have the faintest idea what he wanted to ask. Iruka asked him what he wanted to talk about, and Naruto abruptly blurted out, "I'd like it if you'd come to the wedding as my dad." The second Iruka heard that, a giant grin spread over his face. He answered immediately, "Leave it to me." Iruka even cracked a joke as he was seeing Naruto off outside. "You came in with such a serious look on your face, I thought you were going to ask me to treat you to ramen again." The minute Naruto's figure disappeared out of his sight, Iruka found himself publicly bursting into tears. In all his years of being a teacher, nothing else had ever made him feel this happy. "The path I chose wasn't wrong," Iruka thought as he wept, his tears overflowing seemingly without an end. And now, even when it was just seeing the word Naruto written at Ichiraku Ramen, Iruka felt his eyes starting to burn again. He even found himself ordering another topping of Naruto. It was because Naruto was a dearly beloved, special pupil to Iruka. Of course, Iruka wasn't the type of teacher who gave special treatment to one pupil above the others. He never played favorites. But that being said, Naruto wasn't just his dearest pupil. Even amongst all the people Iruka knew, Naruto was a special existence for him. Although, it hadn't always been like that. When Iruka had first become Naruto's class teacher, he had mixed feelings. Whenever Iruka looked at Naruto's face, the faces of his dead parents would never fail to come to mind as well. Iruka was an excellent shinobi. His parents had been excellent, as well, and that was partially why when Iruka was still young, they'd gone out to the battlefield and never come back. When the village was being attacked by the demon fox, Iruka's parents had headed to the front lines to protect Iruka and everyone else from the assault. They'd fought without rest until their very last breaths. And ever since then, Iruka had lived through the rest of his adolescence without anyone to praise him, without anyone to acknowledge him. Every single time he returned to a pitch-black home with nobody else inside, he'd think of his parents. The years passed, and Iruka became a teacher. And who would appear in front of him as a student but Naruto? Iruka knew that the demon fox, the 9 tails, was sealed inside of Naruto. And he was also perfectly aware that Naruto hadn't done anything wrong and had nothing to be blamed for. Even though he understood it, even though many years had passed and he should have been able to accept it, his head understood, but his heart was discomposed. His father had been a silent and severe man. His mother had been a composed woman, family-oriented and reliable. They had both been jounins who were deeply trusted by many people. Whenever Iruka had hung out with his friends, he'd never stopped talking about his parents with a deep glow of pride. He wanted to quickly grow up and become a fine shinobi too, so he could support them. But then, in the blink of an eye, the demon fox appeared in the village, with a blood-curdling howl that sounded like it could pierce the very heavens themselves. His mother had sustained injuries trying to protect him. His father had every inch of him covered in blood, but he was still scrambling to try and fight. His parents' worn and weary figures would start fading and slipping away, and then Iruka would wake up with a start, back in the dark of his room. It was a nightmare he'd see every now and then, ever since he was young. But after Naruto was made his pupil, Iruka started seeing that same nightmare every single night. The nightmares made him completely emotionally drained, and Iruka found himself starting to unconsciously avoid Naruto. Naruto would constantly pull pranks, and that made his other classmates dislike him. But your classmates were supposed to be your comrades. But Iruka couldn't bring himself to do anything. All he could do was watch. His confidence as a teacher crumbled away. He was completely useless. Until one day, Iruka realized a certain fact: Naruto is the same as me. The pain of living day in and day out with no one to praise you, no one to acknowledge you. I know that pain better than anyone, so why didn't I notice this until now? After that realization, Iruka never found himself avoiding Naruto again. Soon, his nightmares disappeared as well. But what if? What if I hadn't had that realization? Even now, the thought occasionally bothered Iruka. If he hadn't had that realization, then it was very possible that Iruka could have become someone who thought about nobody but himself, who believed he was the only one in a pitiable circumstance. He could have become the lowest of the low, an idiotic bastard who didn't notice the pain of anyone but himself. Iruka believed it was thanks to Naruto that he'd escaped that fate. Meeting Naruto had been something that had changed his life. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Naruto was the reason Iruka had decided to work as a teacher for as long as he lived. That's how important Naruto's existence was to Iruka. At that moment, it was because he was thinking of old times. A certain man's face flashed briefly before Iruka's mind. The man's name, Mizuki. He'd been a man who held high grades, and been blessed with a talent for ninjutsu. Mizuki was someone Iruka had known since childhood. They'd applied for the teaching examination together, worked as teachers together, and helped each other. Mizuki had always been smiling and soft-spoken, unlike Iruka. And his tendency to nag, so he'd always been a popular teacher amongst the students. But Mizuki had another side to him, different from the smiling face he showed their students. He had been full of deep jealousy, a man who couldn't believe in himself. Nobody truly grasps the real me. The real me is far more amazing. I'm not all that I appear to be. I'm not some small human to be pushed into a tiny corner like this. Everyone in the village is underestimating me. Mizuki only ever let those words spill past his lips around Iruka. In a nutshell, Mizuki was another person who was troubled because he had no one who would acknowledge him. That was why Mizuki turned into someone who viciously pursued things, only caring about the end results and nothing else. When things didn't go well, he blamed others. He grew jealous and resenting, and he didn't sever the wicked feelings that were leading him astray. In the end, Mizuki had taken the wrong path as a shinobi. Mizuki, Iruka thought, when it comes to being a teacher, there's no such thing as instant results. Any results from your teaching will be seen in 5 or 10 years. No, for some cases, they may need even more time. It depends on how those children are taught and raised, and what kind of adults they grow to be. The results from teaching are seeing the lives our students live when they grow up. But if you couldn't see even that, of course you wouldn't understand. Now, Naruto was so famous that there wasn't a single person in the village who didn't know his name. Everyone acknowledged him. Naruto, who had been bullied and laughed at ever since he was a child, who had lived his days isolated from everyone else. Naruto. Would Mizuki have been able to predict this future for Naruto? No, he wouldn't have. Someone who hadn't spent their years as a teacher would never be able to see what Iruka was seeing now, the future of a student unfolding before his very eyes. This feeling, these emotions, nobody else could possibly understand them. I had wanted you to feel this emotion as well, Mizuki. By the time Iruka left Ichiraku's, it was already dark outside. He hurried on his road home, feeling the night wind pushing at his back. The wedding present he bought for Naruto and Hinata was inside his vest's front pocket. It was nice to feel the heavy weight of something so important against his chest. He thought that he really was a happy man. It wasn't just Naruto who still felt affection towards Iruka after graduating, but many of his other students as well. There wasn't a happier feeling in the world than that. Naruto especially would frequently come to see Iruka, asking if they could go and eat some ramen together. But, in the future, Hinata would probably be making meals for him at home, so if Naruto still went out to eat as frequently, she'd probably get mad at him. Thinking about that, Iruka couldn't help but laugh. His good mood continued the journey home. Iruka entered pitch-black house with nobody inside and turned on the lights. There was a single toothbrush sitting in the cup beside his sink. He thought he might have to replace it soon. A half-drunk cup of tea lay, forgotten, on his coffee table. Iruka realized he'd forgotten to bring his laundry back in from where he hung it out to dry and moved to bring them back in. His underwear in particular was now freezing cold from hanging out in the night air. There was a faint splash as a drop of water fell from the kitchen sink's faucet. It was a quiet night. Iruka let out a sigh, looking up at the low ceiling. It might be about time that I start seriously looking for a life partner too. For some reason, the thought that entered his mind felt particularly strong today. Iruka made a small fist and murmured to himself, "All right, let's not to lose to Naruto." It was a very quiet declaration. As for what happened with that matter, let's leave that for Iruka to find out. Chapter 7. The final mission. Beginning, Lee and Tenten had been talking at the training grounds. Shikamaru and Choji had met up by chance. Sakura and Ino had faced each other in their favorite store. Sai had crumbled on the spot as he stared up at the sky. Iruka had been humming as he hung his laundry to dry. And Ichiraku was busy with work as usual. Not a single person had noticed the tiny insect flying near them. It was only one insect. It was flying restlessly around the village of Konoha. It was a very small insect, so small that nobody paid any attention to it. And even if anyone did become aware of it, they'd soon lose sight of it in the clear and bright, sunny weather. It was difficult to keep watching a tiny bug that was flying restlessly round and round. However, suddenly, the insect stopped moving. Or rather, to be more accurate, it had taken a break to rest its wings. When an insect stops its movement anywhere near you, it becomes much easier to see. Aburame Shino looked intently through his sunglasses at the winged insect that had stopped atop his fingertip. "You've worked hard," he said, thanking the bug in a quiet voice. As he did so, the bug on his fingertip walked down into his palm and then very calmly and naturally disappeared into Shino's sleeve. A bug had just gone inside his clothes, but Shino wasn't flustered. Rather, he had a very calm look on his face. That was only natural. The reason was that Shino was a shinobi who had been born into the Aburame clan, which was a line of insect users. The people of his clan would allow insects called kakashi to reside inside their bodies. Afterwards they would command those insects as they liked, and in return allowed the insects to feed on their body's chakra. This is how their contract continued. And the very bug that had gone into Shino's sleeve a moment ago was simply another kakashi that Shino manipulated. It was very natural that Shino had remained calm, because all that had happened was that the insect had returned to its nest. In their contract, the insects were mainly used out in the field during missions, but they had a wide variety of uses. Besides attacking and defending, they helped seize the enemy they were hunting down, doing things such as chasing and or searching. They were used for pretty much every scenario. A large number of insects could even take on the shape of a human and use your own jutsu. In this way, the Aburame clan, who lived side by side with a large number of insects since the day they were all born, became familiar with the nature of those insects and perfected the jutsus they used when they fought alongside them. They were a Hiden clan. And, this day Shino had been using one of his clan's hidden techniques to spy on the activities of his comrades. As for why he'd do such a thing, the reason lay in the man who was standing near Shino. "So, how'd it go?" Onizuka Kiba asked as he played with the ninja dog, Akamaru. "As expected, it looks like everyone's working to obtain wedding gifts," Shino replied from where he stood, a high ground that allowed him an unbroken eyes view of the village. "Just like I thought," Kiba said. "So, has anyone already decided what they're gonna get?" "Most of them haven't yet. It looks like they're mostly meeting up to consult with each other." Kiba let out a whoop at Shino's reply. "Yahoo, just like I wanted." As Kiba spoke, he brushed the goatee growing on his face. Lately, Kiba looked like he'd grown very fond of it and touched it whenever he could. It looked like it was becoming a habit. "It's our chance to act while everyone's worried. It's finally my time to shine. More accurately, our time to..." Shino corrected. Kiba let out a laugh. "I know that." "Right, Akamaru?" Kiba said, patting the ninkan whose length was longer than Kiba's own height. Kiba had been born into the Onizuka clan, who was a clan of ninja dog users, so for him, Akamaru was a partner he had been eating and sleeping alongside ever since his childhood. It was the same for Akamaru, and even now when he had passed 10 years of age, Akamaru still continued to accompany Kiba on missions every day. Akamaru immediately barked twice as a reply to Kiba's question. "Yeah, that's right," Kiba said. "We're gonna find a present that nobody else has given, one that comes only from Team 8. Team 8, huh?" Shino thought as he watched Kiba and Akamaru play together. His thoughts were going back to the first day he had been put on the same team as Kiba. The silent Shino, the action-loving Kiba and Akamaru, and the withdrawn and thoughtful Hinata. Those three people and one animal had been the members of Team 8. They were comrades who had trained together, supported each other, and always been together. However, while the mature Hinata had been one thing, Kiba had been boisterous, reckless, and extremely prone to grabbing leadership to himself. When Shino had been put on the same team as Kiba, he'd found his different character and way of thinking to be extremely tedious, and had spent every day sighing to himself and lamenting the difficult future that was no doubt in store. "I don't think I'll be able to get along with you well." The reason is that even now, Shino could clearly remember his past self who had said those words. On that note, his words were cut off because at that moment in the past Kiba had shouted, "What the hell's with you? You're really gloomy." Kiba really had been crass ever since the old days, always speaking in a loud voice like an idiot. "Kiba, do you remember what I said the first time we were put on the same team?" Shino suddenly asked that question without any real reason. Impulsiveness was Kiba's department. But Kiba most likely wouldn't remember it. "The first time?" Kiba asked. "Oh yeah, that time when we were eating lunch at the training grounds." Kiba kept petting Akamaru as he thought, looking up at the sky. "Then, right, it was. Only my lunchbox has bugs in it or something like that. I never said such a thing," Shino said. "What in the world?" Forget remembering it, Kiba had even fabricated a senseless fake memory in its place. Shino fixed his stare on Kiba, feeling the anxious feeling he had back then still lingering in his insides. "Well, what? That wasn't what you said?" Kiba looked flustered by Shino's stare for a moment before recovering. "Well, forget about the small details. The wedding gifts are more important. Right?" Kiba grinned widely so his canines showed. Shino thought that Kiba's ability to quickly switch moods wasn't a good, but a bad quality of his. In that moment, Shino, Kiba's tone of voice had changed. A hard wind blew between the two of them. Kiba continued speaking with a serious look on his face. "I was happy that Kakashi-sensei called this thing a mission. Even I can get that Kakashi-sensei and everyone else are just calling a mission in name only, since he's someone who's got eccentric judgment. But, for me, I really think of this as a mission. I'm thinking this is gonna be the last mission for us members of Team 8, Shino didn't even let out a sound of agreement, calmly, silently listening. It's like we've been given this last mission. Kiba continued. Like maybe Kakashi-sensei could have specially arranged this for that purpose, or I could just be overthinking things. Kiba stopped talking and looked away, laughing like he was embarrassed. No, you're not overthinking, Shino said. Shino understood Kiba's feelings so much it hurt. It was because he'd been having the exact same feelings too. Hinata was currently busy getting ready for the wedding. Kiba and Shino both went out on missions a lot as Chunins leading their own teams. The four of them hadn't been able to head out on any missions as Team 8 lately. And, most likely, after this date, Team 8's last mission for Hinata, nobody else would be involved. This was something that only people who had been on their team ever since they were young, who had been through all the happiness and sorrow with them, would ever understand. Kiba and Shino, and Akamaru as well. It was definitely something nobody but Team 8 could do. That was why Shino had sent his Kakaichu to fly and investigate the states of their other comrades. So Shino and Kiba could give a more magnificent present than anyone else. So they could make Hinata happy. So, what are we going to do? Shino asked. Kiba fell silent. He was staring at nothing in particular without saying a single word. Silence continued between the two. Akamaru restlessly moved around, uneasily letting out a whine as he looked up at Kiba. Shino couldn't tolerate the unnatural silence coming from Kiba. Is it possible you haven't thought of anything yet? Kiba silently nodded. He'd said all that, but at the end he didn't have anything but his enthusiasm to show for it. As expected, Kiba was always Kiba. This side of him hadn't changed ever since the old days. For now, we have to think only of things that Hinata likes. It can't be beyond the things she likes. The reason is that if we give her something that, for example, we didn't know she disliked on her long-awaited wedding day, the atmosphere will turn bad. They'd gone through missions with Hinata for many years. It was enough to say they were comrades who'd eaten out of the same pot. There was no doubt they knew what Hinata liked better than anyone else. Stuff that Hinata likes is, well, there's sensei, Kiba said. Shino thought over this. It was true that Hinata definitely loved that soup made of azuki red beans. Whenever they were taking a break in training or on a mission and they'd stop by a tea shop, Hinata's eyes would shine if she saw any sensei. And then there's, pressed flowers. Kiba said, she really likes making pressed flowers. Man, she has such simple hobbies. Sensei and pressed flowers, neither of them would do for a wedding gift. Come to think of it, was there anyone in the world who gives soup as a wedding present? Shino racked his brains. Wait, that's right. Naruto, he always loves eating ramen, right? Kiba suddenly said. Yes, Shino said. Ramen is something he eats often, isn't it? And, Kiba said, this is something really surprising that not everybody knows, but Naruto really likes Ashiruko. Oh, is that how it was? Now that you mention it, I have seen him drinking that soup out of a can before. Right? There's something even more surprising than that. Naruto has a hobby of watering plants. And it's not just watering them either. Kiba had a gleeful look on his face as he lowered his voice to murmur. Naruto, he likes talking to the plants while he waters them. Of course, just when he's the only one in the room. Akamaru and me just happened to be walking by the front of his house when we heard him talking to one while he watered it. He's got an odd side, talking to plants. Right, Akamaru? Akamaru let out one vigorous bark in reply. Shino didn't understand most of what Akamaru said, but he knew that this reply meant exactly. That definitely is unusual. Shino said. Talking to bugs is normal, but that isn't so for plants. He might have just been feeling really bored, but there's also the other possibility. Well, just to be sure it'd be best to go and see the situation ourselves. He crossed his arms and nodded. Naruto did have certain odd sides to him. Come to think of it, In the past, Naruto had even played poker with his own Kage Bunshin. Well, that was what happened when you didn't go to play with him, Shino thought. But you know, Kiba said, when you rethink it all, it's pretty amazing. What is? You know, the stuff they like. Like Zensai and Ashiruko? And then pressing flowers to preserve them and watering plants to take care of them, stuff like that. No matter how you look at it, the stuff they like and their hobbies are pretty similar, aren't they? I see, you're right about that. But Kiba, wa? The most important subject is the wedding present. Yeah. What should we do? Silence covered them for the second time. Kiba sat down, absent-mindedly stroking Akamaru. Shino stood still as usual, staring down at the ground. Then let's ask somebody. This time it was Kiba who'd been unable to endure the silence. Everybody was asking everyone else too, right? Kiba said, let's do that too, yeah. Where did the Kiba who was so enthusiastically talking about teammates' last mission go? That's what Shino thought as he looked down at the line of ants marching past his feet. He thought it, but he didn't say it, because Kiba had now given him a much better idea. I suppose we also have no choice but to go and consult someone, alright. So, who are we gonna ask? Your dad? I'm saying this just in case, but my mom and sis won't do, and no? They're completely different types compared to Hinata. Kiba said, getting to his feet. Good grief, he was so impatient. There's someone who's very suitable for teammates' last mission. Shino said. If you ask who, then that person is, I gotcha, that's who you mean. Alright, let's go Akamaru. Kiba had instantly understood what Shino meant before he could even finish speaking. He rapidly started running off with Akamaru. Both their figures slowly started getting small with the distance. He doesn't have even the slightest sliver of calm in him. Shino thought, and began walking after Kiba. By the time Shino finally arrived at their intended location, Kiba and Akamaru had already made themselves right at home. Akamaru was lying down on the carpet, and Kiba had sunken comfortably into a chair. Shino calmly entered. Oh hey, you're late, Kiba said, a teacup in his hand. Kiba sat far too comfortably, like he was sitting in his own house. Really, the word restraint was probably completely foreign to Kiba's brain. You're too relaxed, Kiba, Shino said, silently sitting down as well. As he did, an infant came running from another room, throwing herself on top of Akamaru. Akakiba, Akakiba, she said, pulling at Akamaru's ears. Akamaru lifted his neck, looking a little annoyed, but then lay down again and let the child continue with what they were doing. I keep telling you, I'm Kiba, and he's Akamaru, Kiba said with a very put-upon tone. It sounded like they kept repeating this conversation many times. The child let out a squeal of delight, enjoying herself and laughing. Akakiba and Kibamaru. You're mixing them up now, mixing them together, huh? Please spare me, Mirai. The child's name was Sarutobi Mirai. She was the daughter of the deceased Sarutobi Asuma. Why were you like this? Is it because Akamaru's fur is white, so you're confused? Kiba murmured, throwing a seriously thoughtful look towards Mirai, who had smushed her face affectionately against Akamaru's. It was true that Akamaru was completely unlike his name, white-furred as he was. Kiba had given him the name Akamaru because after eating the special soldier pill that Kiba concocted, Akamaru would become covered in others' blood in battle. But Shino thought it was unlikely that the color of Akamaru's fur had any connection to this. The reason he thought so was that Kiba and Akamaru frequently came to play with Mirai during their walks. If she hadn't seen them often, then it would be normal for Mirai to not remember their names, but that didn't apply to Kiba and Akamaru. And yet, Mirai mixed up their names. It was most likely because Kiba and Akamaru were so close and so often together that she did that. Actually, Shino sincerely hoped that was the case. Looks like she still doesn't remember the difference even though you come to play with her a lot. Shino hadn't really meant for the words to come out, but they had. Kiba dejectedly hung his head. "It doesn't bother me," he muttered. "Little kids do that a lot." "It's Uncle Bucky," Mirai suddenly said, pointing at Shino. Shino felt a painful feeling come over him, and Kiba, who had been dejectedly hanging his head until just a second ago, suddenly let out a loud, booming shriek of laughter. I am Big Brother Bucky," Shino said, unable to hide his shaking. "The reason is that I am still too young. I heard what was happening from Kiba," a voice behind him said. Shino turned his head to see a woman with lustrous black hair. Mirai's mother, Sarutobi Kurenai, had come in with tea and some food. She had been through pregnancy and childbirth, and was now going through housework and childcare, but for Kiba and Shino and Hinata, she was always their teacher who had been in charge of their teammate. Shino and Kiba had both thought that if they wanted to ask anyone for advice about teammate's last mission, then it would be her. That was why they'd come here. "But a present for Hinata, huh?" Kurenai said, leaving the plate, it was mostly full of snacks, on the table and sitting down. "But rather than me, don't you think it would have been better to ask Hanabi?" "No, well, I mean yeah, but," Kiba mumbled, his hand stopping mid-action as he'd reached out for his favorite snack, beef jerky. Hanabi was Hinata's little sister. Compared to the plain and not very fashionable Hinata, Hanabi was a far more fashionable young woman and extravagant in her tastes. "We thought that it might be best not to involve her family members." Kiba awkwardly tried to speak in a polite way he was unaccustomed to. Lately, Kiba had been trying to speak politely to Kurenai. It was most likely the fact that he'd realized you couldn't speak to your old teacher like you were best friends after a certain age was passed. And then, of course, well, we are not that intimately acquainted with her. Kiba stuttered. While they had gone to the Hyuga house a few times to meet up with Hinata and such, neither Kiba nor Shino had met up with Hanabi outside of that. It'd feel awkward to suddenly go and ask her to consult with them about wedding gifts. Plus, like Kiba said, if they involved her family members, then there was the chance that the talk of wedding presents would reach Hinata's ears. You're right, Kurenai crossed her arms and thought. In the meantime, Kiba finally laid his hands on the beef jerky, chewing on it furiously while muttering, "The feeling when you chew it is really important, the feeling, like it was a magic spell." There was another reason for Kiba to get so upset when the subject of Hanabi was mentioned. Shino knew a little bit about it. The incident had happened on the day when they'd been told that unbelievable news about the moon possibly falling. The memories of those days when meteorites were raining down on the earth, and it really felt like the last days of their existence, were still fresh in Shino's mind. Most of the village had been repaired by now, but if you took one step outside the village, you'd see the leftover scars from that time still remaining. No matter how many months or years passed, you still wouldn't be able to perfectly restore all the trees that had been moved down by the meteors or the meteor craters left behind. Shinobi had gathered to protect the village from the meteors raining down on them, and in the midst of this a team had been assembled to rescue Hanabi, who had been kidnapped by the mastermind behind the occurrence. It was a team assembled to find the hideout of the mastermind as well as rescue Hanabi. A mission like that was Kiba's specialty, since he was a ninja dog user with his own keen sense of smell. He'd been brimming with confidence, saying how likely it was that he'd be picked due to his connection to Hinata via Team 8. But Kiba's name hadn't been on the list of those selected for the mission. Kiba had become incredibly depressed about that matter. What aren't I on it? If it was me, I could find where Hanabi was straight away. I could definitely help out. I really wanted to find the creep's hideout and whoop his ass with my ninjutsu. I wanted to help stop the moon from falling. Even now, Shino could clearly remember Kiba's endless grumbling about the subject. It's over, Kiba had murmured in despair, and Shino remembered telling him, well, the whole world may be over soon. Why did he remember that? Probably because Kiba had ignored it. But Shino thought that Kakashi-sensei had chosen the right teams for the right occasions. Kakashi-sensei was the Rokudame Hokage, and he had to make his decision while thinking of saving everyone's lives, so instead of putting Kiba on the team that was sent to rescue Hanabi, he put him on the life-saving team in the village. Kiba's mission had been to quickly find and save the people who were buried under the rubble of buildings that had collapsed after the meteors hit. It was an important mission that was only possible precisely because of Kiba and Akamaru's keen senses of smell. And Shino had also been sent out as part of the life-saving team along with Kiba. It was because his bugs were able to slip into small cracks in the rubble that people and dogs couldn't go through. As Shino and Kiba hurried around the village while riding on Akamaru's back, they had managed to save many people who hadn't managed to escape before the meteors crashed. And furthermore, Kiba hadn't taken refuge in the shelters, instead staying outside to help the people who still believed that tomorrow was going to come, the village shinobi as well as Ramen Ichiraku's owner Tucci, who was preparing ingredients for tomorrow's ramen. H even boasted about how if any meteorite came falling towards the store, he'd destroy it with his new jutsu. He put a stunning amount of effort into his activities. Kiba's stroke of bad luck was that the only one to see his efforts had been Shino, who was constantly beside him. And Shino had never told anyone about what happened that day. Shino thought that good deeds like that weren't the kind that should be displayed to the world. Shino was intently watching Kiba jerkily tearing into his beef jerky. Shino thought it was likely that Kiba's bitter memory of not being picked for the Hanabi rescue team had resurfaced when he heard her name. However, Shino knew. He knew that when push came to shove, Kiba was a reliable man. He knew that Kiba had gone running around the village with Akamaru and saved many people's lives. He knew Kiba had even protected Ichiraku Ramen while he was at it. Only Shino knew those things. Wasn't that just fine? Although Shino hadn't really been able to hear the name of Kiba's ninjutsu when he used it since the sound of the meteorite being destroyed had been too loud, but still, it was just fine to leave things that way, wasn't it? Ah, instead of tea, I'd have liked to be able to drink shuchu, Kurenai murmured, bringing some snacks to her mouth. Kurenai had been famous for loving alcohol ever since the old days. On top of that, she loved the strong stuff and drank a lot of it. She was a heavyweight drinker. It was impossible for Shino to imagine drinking as a hobby since he didn't touch a drop of alcohol himself. Alcohol was not good. It got his bugs intoxicated. Shino avoided anything that so much as had a strong smell. Be it something you ate or something you drank, or even medicine, if the smell was strong or the ingredients were fiercely effective, they'd influence the bugs inside him. For insect users, that was a life or death situation. That was why Shino liked to eat things that were soft on both humans and insects, like salads. Ah, actually, speaking of alcohol, do you two know about this story? Kurenai said, taking her eyes of Mirai and Akamaru to look at Shino and Kiba. In the old days, the Forest Senju clan used to give honey wine as a wedding gift. Senju? I think I heard of that name in history class. Kiba tilted his head in puzzlement, tugging at his goatee. Shino shook his head in exasperation. The first and second Hokage. Shino said. Ah, yeah. No, of course I knew that, you know. Kiba said. Kurenai smiled as she watched them. Watching you two talk like that reminds me of old times, she said. Seeing Kurenai's smiling face made Shino think of old times too. Honestly, Kurenai had been a really relentless teacher. Strong-minded was a rude word to use, but she was an extremely sensitive genjutsu user. She'd been especially fond of frequently using dizzying genjutsu during their training, and even remembering it now made Shino recall the nausea along with it. That's how severe she had been. Of course, it had been Kurenai's way of showing her love, and it had definitely toughened up the members of Team 8, but still, one couldn't help but think about how incredulous it would be for someone like that to simply mellow after becoming a mother. Look at you shamelessly breeding with a goatee. Back in the old days your face used to be slippery smooth. Kurenai said, grinning as she pinched Kiba's cheeks with both hands. Ow, please stop put kawane sensui. Kurenai looked like she was having a lot of fun. Maybe she hadn't really mellowed out. So, Sensei, the the story about the honey wine of the Senju clan? Helping a friend in need wasn't Shino's motivation. He just wanted to hear the rest of the story. Ah, yeah. The forest Senju clan, just like their name implies, lives in the forest, Kurenai said, letting go of Kiba's cheeks. There are bears in forests, right? And you know how bears will knock down beehives to try and get to the honey inside, right? People say that the origins of honey wine were in those knocked down beehives that happened to have rainwater mixed in with the honey. It was found in ancient times by the Senju clan who lived in the forest. It was a wondrous drink for them, something that had the nutrition of honey and made them energetic. So naturally, after that, the making of honey wine slowly became part of their culture. Why did they give it as a wedding present? Well, first off, it was because at the time the recipe for honey wine wasn't perfect, so it was rare. But most importantly, it was because of the high nutritional value. The theory was that the honey was abundant, so drinkers of it would share its fertility. Either way, it all comes down to the fact that alcohol's always been used to celebrate happy occasions since old times. But that Naruto doesn't drink alcohol, you know? Naruto prefers to drink ramen soup and oshiruko. Kurenai sighed deeply when Kiba and Shino said those things. That kid's eating habits are so biased. Shino and Kiba simultaneously shuddered as they remembered going to Naruto's house in the past and finding the kitchen empty of anything but ramen. Lately Naruto had been boasting that he'd started eating vegetables too, but even that was just to the degree of him occasionally buying a few cherry tomatoes. Shouldn't he be dead by now? Kiba said, which was a fine comment considering Kiba himself ate nothing but meat. You couldn't help but think that Hinata would have to do something. But well, at any rate, honey wine can be used as a medicine and used in cooking too. If it's Hinata, then I'm sure she'd be able to find a good use for it. Plus, she probably wouldn't use it straight away. Isn't it a wonderful and romantic idea for her to open a jar of honey wine one day and think back to her wedding day? I see, thinking of it like that, a wedding present that's mentioned in history and legends is a really good idea. Kiba said, and on top of that, it's something used by the clan of Konoha's founder. It's definitely a fitting gift for me to give, as the future Hokage. Kiba was nodding with his eyes closed now. He was probably imagining his future Hokage self. Shino, on the other hand, was quietly thinking. Something was bothering him a little. Honey wine was an idea they'd gotten from the alcohol lover Kurenai-sensei. Shino and Kiba hadn't thought it up themselves. But, no matter how disinterested Shino was in alcohol, he did have a basic understanding of the variety of alcohol sold in the stores and bars of Konoha. Hey Shino, let's hurry up and go out to buy it. Kiba was in high spirits, but Shino never remembered seeing honey wine around the village. Is such a thing sold? Shino murmured, I'm hearing about it for the first time in my life. Kurenai easily answered, it isn't sold. Huh? Kiba let out an idiotic-sounding voice at Kurenai's comment. If it was being sold, I'd have bought it already. That stuff is really rare to find in our village. But then what do we do? That legendary honey wine is something that I only got to taste once, many years ago. That's all that I can say. Oh no, Kiba's face looked like the end of the world was coming. In fact, Shino thought he looked worse than he had when the moon had been falling. Kiba really had an endless range of facial expressions, Shino thought as he stoically watched. The honey wine that I drank was given to me by a traveling merchant. It really delicious, so I asked him where it came from. I was thinking of going and buying it too. And, what do you think he said as a reply? Kurenai paused, her face turning grim. He said he bought it in the Saraku. You mean those black market guys? Saraku, a group of renegades unreachable by any country or village. People said the village itself looked like a perfectly normal place nobody would glance at, but in fact was the hometown of a clan of black marketers. It was a place nobody heard good rumors about, the kind that got their hands on hard-to-find weapons that had been banned everywhere else. To be more accurate, the merchant said that he'd gotten the honey wine from a beekeeper who lived in Saraku. So they even have beekeepers? Well, the black marketers who settled there aren't just gonna live off of weapons and money, you know, so there must be an original community there who supplies life necessities. Since the merchant who had sold the honey wine had gotten it from Saraku and then visited Konoha, that meant that there had to be some way of communicating with the community inside Saraku. I wasn't able to find them, but you guys are Team 8, specialized in hunting people down, aren't you? Kurenai said with a mischievous smile on her face. She looked pretty serious about it. Just leave it to us, Kiba said. As long as Meat and Shino and Akamaru are there, it'll be a piece of cake. Kiba stood up at the end of his declaration, and Akamaru, who had been letting Mirai do as she willed, now stood up as well without any prompting to go next to Kiba. Mirai watched Akamaru leave her, and said in a voice that showed how reluctant she was to say goodbye, "Shinomaru's going? I always tell you, he's Akamaru. And come to think of it, you've really mushed all our names together this time, haven't you?" Shino had been watching the usual exchange when Kurenai prompted him to turn towards her. "Hey, Shino," Kurenai said in a very quiet voice so no one else would hear. "Kiba doesn't have very good judgment. You understand what I mean, right?" Shino silently nodded, meeting Kurenai's eyes. "While you're at it, buy some for me as well." That was the message Kurenai wanted to impart. "There won't be any problems," Shino said, leaving as well. From branch to branch, they were flying through the thick greenery of trees. Shino and Kiba and Akamaru were heading out of the village as one team to retrieve Hinata's wedding gift. Soon enough, they already put the distance of one mountain between them and Konoha. Kiba was wearing a jacket over the slightly improved Konoha vest. It was a crudely designed jacket, with fur on the inside. Shino wore his favorite long coat over his own vest, and had raised the hood attached to it over his head. This was their usual attire for missions. In other words, they were clothes that perfectly suited Team 8's last mission. The improved Konoha vests no longer had the double pouches for scrolls that used to be on both sides of the chest, favoring ease of movement over anything else. What was surprising was that they were lighter than the old vests, but more durable. Such a thing would have been unthinkable during the old days. It was an amazing sign of progress in technology. It really made you feel aware that time was passing. The village and people and things as well, they were all changing one by one. Thinking that he'd reached an age where he could feel that times were changing made Shino feel a little sad. And then he thought about the next generation of Konoha, which made him think of Mirai. Which made him think of what Mirai said. "Do I really look that old?" Shino spoke without thinking. Kiba looked over his shoulder at him in midair. Akamaru had gone ahead of them, so it was only them two leaping across the trees. In a way, they almost looked like they were flying in midair. They chose this method of transport over running on the ground because it was faster. With every leap, their surroundings blurred and were quickly left behind. For a while, they moved in silence until Kiba noticed what Shino had said. Oi, don't be bothered by stuff like that." He gave a wide grin. "Uncle Bucky, I am not bothered." "Shut up, Idiotmaru. It's Kibamaru." "No, it's not Kibamaru either." That was the topic of their conversation as they flew over trees. The smell of earth and greenery was strong, and bugs were moving everywhere. It was a nice day with clear weather. It was surprising and incredible, far better than he expected going on the strong winds from last night. Beautiful butterflies were dancing around in the peace of the morning. After a while of silence, Shino opened his mouth again. "I'm not old enough to be called an uncle yet, but if I am called one, then you should be called one too, Kiba, because we're classmates of the same age. You really are bothered by it." "Yes, it bothers me." "Kiba, do I really look that old?" Kiba grinned at Shino openly speaking about his feelings. Well, look at that. Compared to when we were kids, you've gotten a lot more honest." Kiba's all-knowing grin grated on Shino's nerves. Shino deliberately looked the other way when he said, I'm asking you because we've known each other for a long time. So, do I really look that ill? You're really serious about this? Asking twice. Alright, I get it already. You're fine. You look just right for your age. Kiba ran a hand through his hair, his voice strengthening. You're taller than me, and you're always quiet and wear those sunglasses all the time, so of course you look mature. Come to think of it, for a tiny kid like that, we all look old. Really? So, I'm really okay. You're so persistent. Look, you don't even have to wear sunglasses anymore. You've gotten pretty good looking. Not even a little bit, definitely more good looking than Naruto's stupid face, so don't worry. Kiba bluntly said, then confidently pointed a thumb at himself. Well, of course when it comes to good looks, you come in second after me and Akamaru. After Akamaru? I don't really understand that, it's strange. Shino stared fixatedly at Akamaru's tail some distance in front of him. Zensai and Ashiruko are both dishes made of the red beans called azuki, with the only real difference being the consistency, where Ashiruko is more of a soup and Zensai is more like jam. They're both called soups though. End of chapter 6. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.